I went through some depressive moments, but I
Sure.
wasn't deeply depressed like I was on a daily basis.
Right. Right.
And I knew that it was because of all the things that I was going through, that I was doing with my cousins and my sister. And in the meantime, even before then, when I first started experiencing depression, I didn't understand what it was. In order to try to understand it, I would write about it. So I
Sure.
started writing a story about a young woman who was depressed, who was always angry. There was no reason for it. And as I started to understand that what I was dealing with was depression, I attributed that to my main character. So as my main character grew in understanding her situation, I was understanding my situation as well.
Podcast where our ongoing goal is to inspire and empower our listeners to live their best audacious lives ever. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. Now, just as navigating through life's challenges, it's like climbing over a boulder in our path, addressing mental health issues and depression is like finding the courage to scale that boulder, overcome obstacles, and reach the other side where greatness lies. Cathelina Duvert is a debut author, so great to have her. And she recently released her debut novel, The Box, a story about a woman's journey through depression and acceptance of the challenges that helped shape her. With a background in writing and personal journey of overcoming mental health struggles, Cathelina brings a unique perspective to the conversation, her experience of depression, and her own journey towards self-discovery and healing adds a compelling layer to the conversation, shedding light on the importance of mental health awareness and the power of resilience. So now that we got you all set, let's turn to our conversation with Cathelina. Enjoy. Hey, Cathelina, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you making the time to do this.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Audley. I appreciate that.
Yes, we really we spend much time on this podcast, really encouraging people to, again, live that best audacious life we talk about.
Mhm.
And so much of if you sort of think of so much that happens in the world, and so much we're bombarded by so many things that come our way, and really, living that audacious, it's an individual journey.
Mhm.
And the things that come our way, they could be adversity, we can call them challenges, we call them obstacles. There's a whole host of things that we can identify them as, but regardless of what they are, we still have to deal with them somehow.
Mhm.
I oftentimes think I use this analogy where there's a boulder in our pathway. So we're on our pathway of life, and there's a boulder in our path. And we need to find a way to get up, over, around, or through, but get to the other side, because that's where all the greatness lies for us.
Right.
And so, bearing that in mind, I certainly would love to have an opportunity, maybe give you an opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. And you're an author, and you write prolifically, and it's wonderful to hear. And maybe talk a little bit about your journey and kind of what brought you to the point that you're at now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute
Then
sense.
let's,
Yes.
yeah, let's go.
Okay, thank you so much. So yes, my name is Cathelina Duvert, and I am a debut author. I just came out with a book called The Box, my first novel.
Hmm.
And The Box is about a woman who is suffering with depression and her journey to accepting uh the accepting the challenges that have caused her depression. And the book started when I started writing it, oh, gosh, close to 25 years ago. It was because I was going through my own challenges in life. So about 25 years ago, nobody was really talking about mental health. Nobody was really talking about depression. And I didn't understand that that was what I was suffering with.
Hmm.
I was always depressed, saddened by anything, very emotional. I wanted to keep to myself. I didn't understand what I was going through, therefore, nobody else understood what I was going through. And I really felt like I was alone in the world.
Hmm.
And I would just sit there, just contemplating ideas. Thoughts of suicide weren't something, it wasn't something that I was constantly thinking of. It was just like fleeting moments. I was just too chicken. I like to joke. I was just too chicken to try to commit suicide. But I did feel like, what if I wasn't alive anymore? What would that be like? Um, and so I suffered with depression and didn't understand how to go through. I didn't understand what I was dealing with until my sister, who happens to be my twin sister, she knew that this is what I was going through. She did not know how to help me. Finally, she was like, I can't take this anymore. You need to find somebody to talk to. And she actually started looking for a therapist for me to
Mhm.
talk to. And uh, I didn't fight it. I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. And so she's the reason why I started seeing a therapist in the first place. Now, fast forward to a couple of years later, when I decided to leave my job and I no longer had insurance, that means I couldn't continue seeing my therapist. So the therapist that I was seeing, and I was going through group therapy as well as one-on-one therapy, and I was on medication.
Okay.
And all of that had to end because I no longer had insurance because I quit my job. And so for a very long time, I didn't have any of that, and I went through another depressive state, and
Mm.
all this stuff happened again until I finally got another job of insurance. But then I started thinking to myself, this can't sustain itself. I can't keep living with depending on insurance
Right.
and the therapist and medications and all that. And there was a time where even the medication that they prescribed me I started getting a rash on my neck from it, and it was just
Mm.
a
Side
lot.
effects. Yeah.
And so I finally so I decided not to forego not to do the medication anymore. But in the meantime, I started uh having daily, no, weekly meetings with my sister and two of my cousins, and we used to challenge each other. Let's exercise for this amount of days. Let's listen to positive motivational videos. Let's meditate. Let's do affirmations. And it was just a challenge that we were putting out for
Right.
ourselves.
Right. Right.
And by doing all of that,
Hmm.
all of it together,
Hmm.
I discovered, like, later on down the line, I'm not depressed anymore. I went through some depressive moments, but I
Sure.
wasn't deeply depressed like I was on a daily basis.
Right. Right.
And I knew that it was because of all the things that I was going through, that I was doing with my cousins and my sister. And in the meantime, even before then, when I first started experiencing depression, I didn't understand what it was. In order to try to understand it, I would write about it. So I
Sure.
started writing a story about a young woman who was depressed, who was always angry. There was no reason for it. And as I started to understand that what I was dealing with was depression, I attributed that to my main character. So as my main character grew in understanding her situation, I was understanding my situation as well.
It's interesting. Uh, and I'm sure you spend a lot of time sort of trying to uncover or get to the source of the depression.
Mhm,
And it sounds like you weren't very successful,
mhm,
but you still were because you were experiencing it still within it. And what I find really interesting is that you jump to find things to help you deal with it,
mhm.
although you still hadn't identified what the source was.
Right,
And for a lot of people, they're not taking that step till they go, oh, well, what is this? What's
right.
causing this? Where it sounds like you said foregoing that. I said, look, you know what? That's how do we deal with it? And
Yeah.
and that's what I have to commend you on that, because when you it's really you're very focused on the outcome, and that's what I'm hearing, at least, right, loud and clear.
Mhm.
You're focused on how do you get past it, as opposed to trying to spending time understanding what it is.
Right, right. Yeah. Because I didn't even think about how to understand what it was.
Yes.
Um, and I have to admit that in an it wasn't intentional, though. I was taking steps to make myself feel better, but it
Right.
wasn't entirely intentional, not all at the same time anyway. Right.
Hmm.
I highly believe in therapy, by the way.
Hmm.
Even though I feel like there's some people who might need to depend on their insurance and they might not have good insurance or anything. I highly believe in therapy. Right now, currently, I'm not in therapy
Hmm.
because my current well, the therapist that I had, she stopped taking my insurance. And so I did a search for like a number of different therapists to take me on, and but nobody called me back, which I thought was really, really strange, but I'm still looking for a therapist. But it's so important to talk out your feelings. It's so
Yes, yes.
important. It was through therapy and through being open and trying to understand what I was going through that I finally found the source of my depression.
Hmm, hmm.
And I think that if you're not if you're not trying to find ways to alleviate your situation, you might never be open to understanding what caused your situation.
Got you, got you. If I could ask, if you don't mind, could you share what your source was of your depression?
Yes, I don't mind. I don't mind sharing it. It, so I went through when I was about 12 years old. I was in a situation where a boy, probably, I don't know how old he was. I didn't even know him really. A boy fondled me, and I was, so I'm going to explain what the situation was and what my thinking of it was. So he fondled me, and he told me, he said, "Don't worry, I won't tell nobody." And at 12 years old, when it was happening, I didn't really understand. But when he said, "I won't tell nobody," I knew
Hmm.
that this was something that was wrong.
Mm.
And it made me feel so bad about myself. I felt so ashamed. Now I did stick up for myself, which I was very proud of, because we were like in a group it was a group of young kids, all around 12, 13, 14 years old. And when he did this, and I confronted him in front of everybody, and I said, "Don't you ever do that to me again." And I was pounding on him, punching him, and I was really proud of myself. But after all of that subsided, after everybody had a kick about out of what went on, that's when I started to hate myself. I
Mm.
started blaming myself, not him.
Mm.
I allowed this to happen. I was stupid enough to let this happen.
Yeah,
Why did you let this happen?
blame yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I blamed myself. And I didn't look to talk to an adult about it. I kept all those feelings inside of me. And the more I kept it inside of me, the more I hated myself, the more I blamed myself. He was no longer to blame. He did what he did. I was the one who should not have allowed it to happen. And 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 when I realized when I when and when it was happening, I was all about like my thoughts about it. My sister knew what happened, but I never
Right,
talked to her about it. Like, what do you
right.
think about this? And was I in the wrong or anything like that? And I didn't realize, Audley, listen to me, listen very carefully. I didn't realize that this is what caused my depression until
Mm.
about 4 years ago. About 4 years ago. And
Wow,
this happened when I was 12 years old.
wow.
It was in my talking about, the way I feel about myself, understanding my complicated relationship with all different types of men. That's when I
Mm.
was like, oh my gosh, the pieces fit together. And I thought to myself, I was like, it's not like you were raped. Like, so what is the big deal? And this is another mentality that I've adopted from society. Get over it. You weren't raped. He didn't violate you in that way. He
Right,
only touched
right.
you. Get over it.
You stood up for yourself.
Yeah, I stood up for myself.
Wow. I wonder when, if you could describe, so you said it was just 4 years ago you found out. When you found on that moment, like, was it like the heavens and earth opened up and a eureka kind of a moment, or what was that like?
So it's funny. It, okay. So the situation was something that I thought about often because I would write about it. I later found like poems after poems and short stories that I'd written about that same situation.
Mm.
And I'd have to say that for the past 20 years, 20, 25 years, it happened. I remember that. Oh, it was a terrible time. But when I finally realized what caused the depression about 4 years ago, yes, the heavens did open up. But I went through the same pain as I did when it just happened. So
Mm.
it was like a fresh wound.
Reliving it.
I was reliving it. I cried, and I was depressed, and I was upset about this all happening. And I had to talk to my therapist about it. And she's like, she made me feel so much better about it. She was like, "This happened to you. It wasn't your fault." And I know it wasn't my fault, but she had to tell that to me again because the wound was so fresh again. So yeah, the
Mm.
heavens did open up. And you know what? I finally felt free that I was able to talk about, okay, I was depressed. this is what I went through. That's why I'm depressed. Whereas I've always been somebody who was very open about depression, about what I was suffering with, but now I had a source to
Yes.
attribute to it.
You
So yeah.
pinpointed this is exactly what it was and
Yeah.
identify. Yeah, no, no. And again, there's value in that. And so off the top, I sort of commended you about being able to move forward without being to be able to pinpoint it. Not that it wasn't important, right? But it's
Yeah.
like where do you choose to spend your energy and resources, your mental faculties, your emotional well-being? Where do you choose to spend it? On
Mm,
identifying something that you don't know what it is,
mm.
or figuring out how to just move past it. And
I
so
love that.
but
Yes.
not that the other one's more important than the other,
Yes.
because at the end of
Correct.
the day it's our own well-being. But I'll also add to that it's what each individual can handle, right? Because we're
Mm,
all different, and so
yes.
what works for you will be different for me and vice versa. And
Absolutely.
so it's really it's and that's why it's really important to understand where you're at
Hmm.
and how you're feeling about it as a starting point, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what you said really stuck really struck out at me when you said that what works for me will not work with for others, right? And even though I preach, like I am always talking about, all this stuff worked for me. You could try one or all or
Mhm.
just a few, see what works for you.
Yes, yes.
Um, so I tried a number of different things. I've also tried acupuncture, right? That works. That can work for some people. I tell people all the time, immerse yourself in your creative project. What is it that you love to do? What is it that you feel like you can't live without? It doesn't even have to be something creative. If you just love escaping in movies, if that works for you, then do that. Watch all the movies that make you feel good. So yeah, not one, whatever works for me will not work for the next person, but try to find that thing that works for you.
I smile because I think of myself personally, and so for example, I love podcasting. I love connecting like this and sharing, and I can always tell. Um, actually, it's more evident now. When I look back, I don't think it's happening so much now. But I can, I've been doing this podcast the last 4 years or so, and
Mhm.
I can always tell when I'm dealing with an adverse period or some kind of challenge because I do more podcasting. I
Oh,
do more, right?
interesting.
To your point, I immerse myself with even more, and the other interesting thing, and maybe it's because of the kind of work that I'm doing, but whenever I found that anytime I was going through something of a challenge of some sort, I'd have a guest on, and they would speak exactly to what my issue was in that
Wow.
moment. And I'm going, oh, this is exactly what I needed to hear. And
Wow.
and I chuckle every so often because it's like I feel like I'm the one that's winning, and I'm really and I did this to share with others, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm the one that gets all the benefits,
that's
and but
awesome.
it's a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of. And so I always can tell. I'll actually look back and see, okay, so last month you did like 30 interviews, right? Whereas the other month you did 8. Like what happened there, right? And so it's always it's just funny how that works. But to the point, really, it's immersing yourselves in the things that you love. And there's actually like scientifical evidence that supports that when you are doing the things that you love, you're using a certain part of your brain, right?
Mm,
And the
mhm,
brain that sort of unlocks that creativity and free thinking,
mhm,
and in a metaphysical science kind of way, I guess it tracks things to you through the
mhm,
universe, right? By how you think, and so that whole idea or concept of your thoughts becomes things. So
mhm,
really, the point is the more you can put yourself in that immerse yourself in that state, and
mhm,
the more time you can spend there versus that fight or flight sort of thing when things don't go well and you're thinking about survival. The
mhm.
more you can stay in that positive space, the better it is for you long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I feel like so when you said that you do all these interviews when you're, at a low point or what, I feel like it's the opposite for me. Whenever for some reason I can't think of another blog post to write or I'm stuck with my novel, I have to start thinking, what is it that's bothering you? So
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I'm in a depressive state is when I can't create. That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think, um, in fact, as I'm reflecting now, I remember the point was able to pinpoint and identify it. And when I did, I was like, oh, I get it now, right?
Mm, mm,
And um and now I look to stay, in that space as much as I possibly can, because
mm,
I just find overall the well-being is just better for me. And so you take a podcast, you insert, knitting, writing,
mm,
logging, um, cycling, some sort of physical activity, whatever. And,
yeah.
and now you're starting to see, it really becomes powerful. So going back to some of the things that you did, you're doing all sorts of things with your sister to figure out, not necessarily to figure out, but just to keep yourself, you
Yeah.
know,
To keep myself
preoccupied.
preoccupied, exactly. And because I was doing it with my sister and I was doing it with my cousins, I really feel that that's where the secret was, you know. We need people, we need friends, we need supporters, we need our family. We need them in order to help us achieve even the smallest things, I think. You know, we did it together and I was able to find my way because I had other people doing the same thing with me. I think it's so important.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Mm,
I want to stay on that point of other people, because at the same time, things like depression can have an impact on our relationships
mm,
and can keep us isolated and keep us away from the people that we love. And
yes.
and there's a lot of negative implications, as a result of. So I'm wondering, maybe if you if that's something perhaps you could speak through your experiences, and what would you suggest, if you will, for people to not allow it to spill over into the relationships.
So it's very challenging because when somebody is in a very depressive state, um the the need is to stay by yourself.
Okay.
Nobody can help me. And
Mm-hmm.
even if somebody does want to help you, you might feel that they're being annoying or they're being intrusive or whatever. But I would like to say that if somebody is feeling really, really depressed, at least let's somebody else who is trying to be there for you, just be there for you. Sometimes my sister would just sit in the room with me and do or say nothing, right? She doesn't have to keep saying to me, everything's going to be okay. That's one thing we don't want to hear. Everything's going to be okay because we're not feeling that right now. So what is it that we actually need? Just sit, be with somebody, let somebody stay with you. Um, I and because I feel like if you allow them to just stay with you or just be there for you, that won't sever that relationship, and that relationship is really important in your healing, in your growth, I think. But I'm also going to say that's easier said than done, right? It's easier said than done. I can think I'm right now I'm thinking of all the times that I was in a deep depressive state, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't easy to let people in.
Right. Right.
I drew myself further away when people tried to come in. It was when I was in a better mood that I would be like, well, thank you so much for being there for me. I would make sure that I let them know that I appreciated that they were trying to be there for me. So maybe um I wish I had an answer for that because it's going to be different for everybody. Um maybe immerse yourself in the thing that you love to do with a friend, with a family member, with a loved one. I know for me, I'm currently separated from my husband,
Mm-hmm.
and we both suffer with depression. And I feel that um, I was trying to understand my depression. I was trying to get past it, and I don't mean any ill words against him, but I felt that he was immersing himself in the depression that he was feeling. Um, you know, I don't know how much work he was doing with his own therapist, and I felt like that was one of the things that separated us, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So I feel that if you have a spouse that is suffering with depression, maybe try to be there with them, try to do the things that they need to do in order to get out of that depression. Find a way to support them the best way that they feel supported, the best way that they feel like they need to whatever they need to do. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
I'm stumbling over this because it's quite challenging.
And admittedly, it's not. There's. I don't necessarily think there's a answer really, right?
Mhm,
There's. This is one of these things with different perspectives, and again, we
mhm,
talked about the individual sort of approaches that works for
mhm,
each us individually.
mhm,
I think the same could be said for how we manage our relationships,
mhm,
and the health of our relationships and the state that they're already in prior to, and those things all matter, right? And
mhm,
so
mhm.
I don't think there's a one answer, but I was just very much interested in hearing your perspective on it because, there could be something gleaned from that. That perhaps someone could say, "Hey, maybe I could try that," or "Hey,
Mhm,
so please, I don't want you to feel guilty because it wasn't the right answer." But
mhm.
there's many different pathways. Is really the point.
Yeah.
Um, and you talked earlier about depression not being as widely discussed at once upon a time, and
Mhm,
there's been a lot more now than not than in the past. I think in general mental health challenges are more on the forefront, and it's now okay to talk about it, whereas
mhm.
before it was kind of suppressed and kept to ourselves. And
Yeah.
you hear it coming up quite regularly. Oh, mental health challenges, and let's try this and let's try that, or I'm seeing a therapist. Like that seems like a more common thing now. Like it's
Yeah.
almost like if you don't have a therapist, something's wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
That
Right.
seems a
Right.
common thing. But the so for that from that side of it, really pleased. I'm happy about. Um, I think there's still work to be done though, and understanding the need to create space for those individuals. So
Mhm,
as opposed to just saying, "Hey, go see a therapist and work it out," it's what can we as individuals do to create space to
mhm,
allow people to work through their challenges, or even assist them as they do that. I
mhm.
don't know. Is that something that you think where do you think we're on that? We are.
I think we are because there's so much talk about um how you show up for yourself in the workplace.
Mhm.
I'm a teacher, and everything that we do as teachers, at least in my school, is looking towards the socio uh social emotional level of each child, right? And we're encouraged to look after that social emotional aspect of each of our students. And so I think we're moving towards that, and I think it's a very positive thing. I think that we are progressing quite nicely, in my opinion. We're talking a lot about mental health these days because of the pandemic. It brought it to the forefront. Now everybody's talking about it. People are still joking around it about it. People are still joking about therapists needing therapists, and but but there is a seriousness taken with mental illness, with mental challenges these days, that I think that we're on the right path. It's not going to happen overnight because that's just not how our things in our society moves, but I think that we're headed toward the right path.
Gotcha,
There
gotcha,
is a lot
gotcha.
of space for it these days.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's the needle's pointed definitely in the right direction for
Mhm,
sure.
mhm.
For listeners that want to learn more about your book, and where can we send them?
Okay. So my book, The Box. I'm actually in the middle of sending copies out to everybody who pre-ordered from me.
Wonderful.
You could easily go onto my Instagram account, which is Cathelina Duvert, and you could click on the link in my bio, and you'll be able to pre-order a book directly from me. I'll send it directly out, and also I am on I'm on Facebook. However, I don't have my own Facebook account. I have a Facebook account for The Box. So it's just called The Box the Book on Facebook, and you could check it out there.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, listen, Captain, I very much appreciate you for being here and sharing in the manner that you did. I think it's a great, and again, shedding light on and continue to keep that spotlight in a very, very important topic is a wonderful thing. Because really, when you talk, I talked off the top earlier about being able to live this life that we aspire towards, but
Mhm,
there are things like depression that come in our way. So it's really about how we respond to them, how we deal with it, and how we move forward. And so, thank
mhm.
you for doing your part. And congratulations on getting through your own journey as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Same here. Thank you, Cathelina.
Thanks.
Back we are on the podcast, and in a world where mental health challenges are increasingly prevalent, Cathelina's story reminds us of the importance of seeking help, opening up about our personal struggles, and finding support in loved ones and our community. Through sharing her journey, she highlights the transformative power of self-reflection, perseverance, and the strength that comes from facing our inner demons head on. Connect with Cathelina directly for more insights, resources, and support by visiting her Instagram account or her Facebook page, which is dedicated to her book, The Box. And you also can find out more information about her book and upcoming projects in the show notes below. Stay tuned for special offers, exclusive content, and updates from Cathelina about upcoming projects by following her on her social media channels, as well as you can subscribe to her newsletter. Thank you for joining us on the Audacious Living Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and found value in Cathelina's story, please like, follow, subscribe, or share if you haven't done so already, because that enables us to reach even more listeners and continues to inspire positive change. Remember, your audacious life starts now. Stay bold, stay fearless, and keep living audaciously. Thanks for listening. Take care.